Hello, I'm Emily Rutherford Lisska, Executive Director of the Jacksonville Historical Society, and welcome to the Jacksonville History Show. This is the show that celebrates and analyzes our local history. And today, to help us do that, is John Bracey. Hello, John.
Hello, Emily.
Jacksonville native.
Jacksonville Beach.
Jacksonville Beach
Yes,
native.
ma'am.
Do you still live at Jacksonville Beach?
Yes.
You do indeed. Boy, those beach people are loyal, love their beach. And you are the Public Affairs Officer for the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, correct?
Correct.
And we're going to talk about the fire department's history today, and then later on we'll have another segment and we'll be talking about the history of Mayport. So, but first, John, we'll start with you, and again, a big welcome. And the history of Jacksonville firefighting almost mirrors the history of our entire city's history. I mean, when you pick up a copy of a book on Jacksonville's history, the first calamity you're likely to hear about is fire, fire, and more fire, and that was certainly part of the news regularly, and that was of great concern for our citizens, our earliest. Tell me when the first sort of formalized, non-paid, but formalized firefighting began. It probably was the first time we had a few houses in the area.
Well, we know that Jacksonville was founded in the 1820s and chartered about a decade later, and organized efforts at firefighting began to materialize in around 1850.
Okay, so a good decade out, more than a good decade before the Civil War. And of course, I'm sure prior to that, someone just rang a bell or yelled fire, and everyone in the township came running to help.
The way the volunteers worked was a lot of community involvement. You know, Jacksonville had evolved to a point where there were structures, and you have to remember that open flame was a way of life back then. It was used for cooking, it was used for illumination, and it was used for warmth. So there was an inherent risk there always, and when the majority of the structures are built of pine wood, you know, you've got a significant risk there. So over time, as development occurred, population became more dense, there was that risk. And when a fire did occur, it involved volunteers. And the early fire suppression system for the downtown area basically involved 3 water wells dug along the busy road and a big tower at Noonan and Adams Street.
And I think we have an image of the big tower we're going to show while you're telling us about this.
We do, and basically, if an individual, a citizen, saw a fire, he or she would be like the town crier, and they'd start declaring the need for the volunteers to assemble. And basically what we had was a bucket brigade, and that's a bunch of different volunteers communing at the wells that were closest to the burning structure, filling the buckets with water, passing them down the line, and making an attempt to extinguish the fire.
And there is the big bell tower in this picture. Anything you want to add to the story of the bell tower?
Well, all I really know is its position was at Adams and Noonan Street, and it was pretty much up to anyone to give it a ring when there was a fire.
And today people could place that really, well, what would be the east side of Main Street.
That's correct.
And we'll talk a little bit more about the first dedicated firefighting, and that was really, as I recall, looking through all of our history, our fire chiefs were paid much more than our mayors. That's how serious firefighting was. And this is our first fire chief. We have an image of him that you have found, which is just marvelous. I'd never seen this before.
Yeah, that's Peter Jones, and he actually had an interesting political history before he was ever selected as fire chief. He actually served 6 terms as the mayor of Jacksonville.
And I did know that.
Before he was selected as fire chief. But basically, the paid or professional fire department came about after a significant fire in late 1885. It did about $200,000 of damage in downtown Jacksonville. It also led to the fatality of the first volunteer firefighter.
Oh, goodness.
Those 2 events got the attention of elected officials and the citizens, so they decided to formalize firefighting. So in 1886, July of 1886, City Council levied a property tax, raised about $19,000. Some local banks kicked in some supporting funds, and Jacksonville's first ever paid fire department was created.
And when they got that first ever fire department, they decided they would add an actual physical facility at some point for the firefighters.
Right.
And we have you brought a great image of Central Fire Station.
Right. Central Fire Station, it was located in a couple of spots, but ultimately what you're looking at there is Ocean and Adams Street. And when the paid fire department came online, they were operating out of 3 fire stations. That is Central Fire Station, and it actually was destroyed. That structure was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1901. It was rebuilt very quickly after, and it's still in the same location. Looks different nowadays, but it's right there across from the old Hayden Burns Library.
Same location, same footprint, roughly.
Same footprint, exactly.
And of course, the firefighters had a little bit of a different look then, and their facilities probably a little different.
Right. That's a photo that you'll see in Wayne Wood's and Bill Foley's book, The Great Fire of 1901, and what you're looking at is the bunk room of Central Station where the firefighters rest and where the firefighters sleep.
Well, that's a wonderful old photo. And we're going to talk a little bit more because people sometimes don't realize when the town burned down in 1901, and you didn't bring any images of that today, nor did I, because we've talked about the Great Fire of Jacksonville so many times. Let me add, the 3rd largest city fire in our nation's history to this date. So in 1901, when the town all but burned down, we were attempting to save the town with horse-drawn fire apparatus.
Right.
And about a decade after that, things would dramatically change for fire apparatus. And we're going to show an image of that now.
Right.
And I'll let you tell the viewers what they're seeing here.
Well, you know, as motorized vehicles modernized and became more sophisticated and were introduced into the the consumer level, the fire department followed suit. And what you're looking at is a fire engine, one of the first motorized fire engines that the Jacksonville Fire Department had. And based on this, what I would call a keystone, which is right above the bay doors, I'm looking at a number 6. And Fire Station 6 was located over on Florida Avenue in the, I guess I would call that the Springfield area. Okay. And it's not there any longer, but what has been preserved at the Jacksonville Fire Museum, which we'll get to later if we have time, is what I'm calling that keystone up there, that number 6. You can actually come see it at our museum.
And of course, the Jacksonville Historical Society headquarters, we're located on the old Florida Avenue, which is really now called A. Philip Randolph Boulevard, and we're right by the baseball park. And I'm not sure where on Florida Avenue that was. If you'd identified as Springfield, I would say we'd have to head north a good little bit.
Yes.
Of course, in those days where we're located, everyone calls the Jacksonville Historical Society in downtown Jacksonville today. A purist would say East Side Jacksonville. Yes,
that's right.
Now, through the years, a lot of outstanding people were associated with the fire department. Chief Haney, during the Great Fire, he was certainly one of them. And in fact, he made double the mayor's salary at the time. That might have been incentive for Peter Jones to take on the fire chief. But there was a very notable chief in the city, in the firefighting history, in the fire department's history. And I actually grew up knowing this wonderful, wonderful man. I'm going to let you tell about Chief Dowling.
Sure. That's Assistant Chief James Dowling Jr. His father was on the department, and his son, James Dowling Jr., who's in that photo, is considered by some to be the father of the rescue in the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department. You know, as things evolved in the fire service in the 50s and 60s, it was obvious that the majority of our activity was for emergency medical services, and people were looking for a way to improve that service because it was such a large part of our call volumes. At the time, pre-consolidation, a lot of times when folks were injured or sick, private funeral homes, hearses would come and get them and transport them to the hospital. Well, that was a system that Mayor Hans Tanzler took issue with, and the way he reacted to it was to put the responsibility of transporting the sick and injured patients to the hospital on the Jacksonville Fire Department. So we put together a program. We put together an advanced emergency medical service program, advanced life support. We worked with local doctors to develop the protocols, because at the time there really weren't any protocols in place in the late 60s. We kind of looked to combat medics as a means of operation and the triage and so forth, but rescue was basically born in the late 60s, and today it remains to be the bulk of our call volume.
And it's probably unimaginable the thousands of Jacksonville lives this system has saved. Thousands.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, that you actually have trained people coming to an emergency rather than someone attempting to get someone to an emergency room. So it's a whole different ball game. You know, I would hate to overlook the role of the volunteer firefighter in all of this, and certainly in some of the communities. And one such community that had volunteer firefighting was, of course, Marietta. And talk about just what these people did and the money, their own money that they spent to protect their communities.
The volunteers were a great asset to the fire service in the community. And just to give you some context, in pre-1968, pre-consolidation, the paid fire department took care of the core city, the 39-some square miles that consisted of Jacksonville, or that comprised Jacksonville. Then there was the outlying county, okay? The bulk of that fire protection was provided by volunteers. And this photo was taken in 1965. It shows the volunteer contingent for the Marietta Volunteer Fire Department, which is over on the west side off of Hammond Boulevard. And you're looking at probably 13 or 14 men, and the facility, which they very likely, that community invested in itself, or they paid for themselves to build, and made this investment in providing fire protection. And in the mid-60s, there were probably about 20 such volunteer fire departments all around the city of Jacksonville.
We're talking about the fact that building is still there, used for a little bit different purpose, but still there. And we'd be remiss not to show the modern day hazmat. Is it hazmat?
Hazmat team, hazardous materials team. You know, one of the milestones in the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department's more modern history is the development of a hazmat team in 1977. The chiefs and the leadership of the department at that time looked at all of the different kinds of chemicals that were being transported through Jacksonville's roadways, and they identified a risk. So they developed a protocol and a team to respond to certain incidents, such as fuel spills, and just the way to do it right to minimize the damage to the environment and to maintain the safety.
Well, John, we barely touched on the history, and our time is almost up, but I am going to jump to just what the department supports in order to get this history to the public, because, you know, children love it, adults love it. Firefighting is just central to the core of what government does. And I'd love to show an image here of the Catherine Street Fire Museum. I think so important. And this wonderful museum, tell them about it. It's open to the public.
Sure. This is the Jacksonville Fire Museum's exterior, and that facility is an actual station that operated from 1902 throughout the 20th century in a variety of capacities. We believe that the structure, some of the bricks were actually salvaged from some of the buildings that were damaged in the Great Fire, but it's right across the street from Everbank Field. It's in Metropolitan Park. It's open from Monday through Friday, 9 to 4, and you can see hundreds of artifacts, thousands of photos, all tied to the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department's history.
We're not going to get to the interior shots of that, but another day you've got to come back. We'll get you here for the whole show talking about the history of the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department. You're just a wealth of information. We appreciate that you're a native of Jacksonville, embrace this city, know so much about it. Thank you, John Bracey, for being here today and being our guest on the Jacksonville History Show.
Thank you for the opportunity, Emily.
Thank you. If you'll stay with us, we'll be right back. I think I'm on this camera. No? Okay, I'm on this camera. If you'll stay with us, we'll be right back. And Joab Overby will be here, local author, to talk about the history of Mayport and more.